Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. You know, it's been an eventful week in the Supreme Court. I almost dropped this on Thursday or Friday when it came out late. The Supreme Court ruled against the federal government in a Chevron deference case, the Raimondo case. And what this does has giant repercussions for us in the two-way. So what this basically means, if you don't know what Chevron deference is, it means that because you're a subject matter expert, i.e. the ATF when it comes to guns, i.e. the EPA when it comes to the environment, you have been given since the 70s or 80s the ability to make law without going through the legal legislative process. Well, that came to a screeching halt. In a surprised verdict to myself, I didn't expect it to be this sweeping. They came out and said that that's not a thing. That the federal government, which we know because we're in the 2A, has abused this rule, and now it goes back to the rule of lenity. Now, what the rule of lenity means is that they have to rule in favor of the least restrictive, most permissive law when it comes to something that isn't done through legal lawfare through the legislative process. So it no longer means that we have to worry about the stupid pistol brace rule, because that one was a rule that was entirely made up by the ATF. Now, this doesn't go backwards more than that's something that they set in the case law itself for this verdict, that it's not going to apply to anything that's already happened. But since the lawfare is still going on with the pistol braces, this definitely sets in motion a case and a precedent that we will win at the Supreme Court, the absolute Supreme Court law of the land. Not just in the district Supreme Courts, which we have one already. And the case has been in, what do they call it? It's been enjoined, which means that they lost completely in the I think it's the Ninth Circuit or the Fifth Circuit, one of the two. No, it's the Fifth Circuit. It's in Texas, that they have made pistol braces legal again, if your state allows them. Now, there's where you need to be careful, because states like Oregon and Washington, they have banned pistol braces through legal lawfare, which you can't get around. You're going to have your legislators fight that battle for you. But it means that we're not going to have the ATF making these laws up without going through legal, trying to go through the legal process of going through the state and the Senate, or the Senate and the House, I should say. And that's a great thing for the 2A. So we had a huge win. That's monumental. And this was all because of fishing guys that raised the concern, because they were being charged $700 a day by the EPA to have them on a fishing boat. So they were having to pay for their normal costs, but pay $700 a day in addition to that. The government has gotten too big. We've talked about that. I've talked about it a lot to all you guys. And we've seen it. There should be no lawfare that happens without going through the process. And time again, Trump used it first, and we've been put in this fight because of Chevron deference. And now it looks like we won. A big victory. This is a day, a week we should be celebrating. I celebrated all weekend in my own little ways. I didn't drink or raise a lot of hell, but I did have a beer thinking about this. The other way we won is, if you're paying attention to the presidential race, you saw the debate, okay? There's calls now from the Democratic Party themselves, the hierarchy, saying, hey, man, we probably shouldn't run Joe Biden or we're going to lose. Now, I still believe that there are people on both sides of the aisle here that will vote blue or red no matter who, and that's a big deal. But you saw, if you watched the debate, you saw in real time what we've always known about Joe Biden for the last few years, that he doesn't have it together. And it raises a very big question for me. Who's running the country? Because if that man even with this cold or whatever, because I've had a cold and, I can't say I've made the best decisions in my life when I was cold-stricken, but I was still at least 80% there, and that man didn't show but like 10% of who he was that night. And I think that's kind of indicative of how Joe Biden's running right now. I don't want to just talk about politics, but this podcast is going to be pretty heavy on it because we have to look at this. If you're a Democrat and you're still, number one, why are you listening to a 2A podcast, one that's very pro 2A? Number two, if you're a Democrat, you're also a fan of large governments, and why would you be a fan of large governments if you're into the 2A? As far as the rest of us, those of us who are more of like the libertarian perspective or the ANCAP perspective, we kind of knew this was a thing. For us, this was watching two geriatric dudes fight over who's going to run our country. I'd like to see some younger blood at that level, but we don't have anyone. What does that mean? We're going to have to look at, if the Democrats replace him, who are the options? And the options are not good for the 2A. That's where I'm going with this. Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, who has done all kinds of stuff in Michigan to try to hamstring the 2A. And Gavin Newsom from New York, the governor of California. Now, be careful there. You know what's going on in California. You know the fights that we have because of the 2A, because the origins usually come from California when they pass something stupid like a magazine ban or a quote-unquote assault weapons ban. Gavin Newsom's behind a lot of that. And he's slimy enough and strong enough that a lot of people will actually line up behind him. And we need to be very careful about this election. They say it all the time that this election could be the end of the country. Well, after seeing the debate, I'm not so sure that they're wrong. There's something to be said about what they've said. There's some credibility there. There's a huge, I would say, black state of government that seems to be running the country, and they need to be dealt with. And the only way I know how to deal with that personally would be to disrupt their way of life. And the biggest disruption I could see them having is having to deal with Trump again. I will not endorse the Libertarian Party candidate. He is an outright communist. There's no way. I'm anti-communist in every way, every fashion possible. RFK Jr. has said that he would sign a bill to dissolve the Second Amendment if it was ever put in front of him. That's a non-starter for me also. So while he may flip and flop, I think he'll actually take more votes away from Biden than he will anyone else. And I really, really, as much as I'm a fan of people like Peter Zeon, I think he's got this election totally wrong, especially after that debate. I think there's a lot of independents. I would consider myself an independent now more than anything else. I have some conservative leanings, but I will vote who I feel is going to do the right job for the office. And after seeing that debate, there is no question in my mind that Biden is not there. And I mean not there in any way. His mental capacity is gone. And it scares me to death that the man, the leader of the free world, the one with the nuclear football, can't hold his own in a debate in any way, shape, or fashion. He stumbles, he mumbles, he didn't look good. And to see him being escorted off stage by his wife at the end of that was a video that isn't a cheap fake, and that's the new buzzword for showing what Biden really is. He's being walked off stage by his wife, and it looks like he's like his wife's walking a toddler down a couple flights of stairs, 4 stairs maybe. And then at the end of that debate, he went to a rally where his wife was saying, "Good job, Joe. You answered all the questions." Well, you're the president, the leader of the free world. If you don't have the capacity to answer all the questions, even incoherently as you did, what faculties do you have in negotiating the world we're in right now? How are you going to stand up against the Russians or the Chinese, or how are you going to deal with Israeli disruption that's going on in Israel right now? These are big questions that matter. I firmly believe this is out of our control, but I'm damn sure going to do everything I can to crawl over broken glass if I have to vote against Biden, because that is nuts, seeing what I saw. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.